And welcome back to the Sports Night interview. And joining us is our college football insider, Crissy Froyd. And we are here to talk about the takeaways from week 2 of college football. And Crissy, there's a lot that I want to discuss with you here today. So let's jump right into it. The number one takeaway we have to discuss from this past week of college football has to be Notre Dame. It was a epic upset for them. Northern Illinois came into South Bend and beat them. And to add insult to injury, Notre Dame paid NIU $1.4 million to go out there and play in that game. Now, Notre Dame has dropped significantly in the rankings after this loss. And one of the things I keep hearing on radio and I keep reading online is, how this loss could impact Notre Dame's chances at making the 12-team playoff at the end of the season. So that's where I want to start this conversation with you. Do you think that it could jeopardize their chances of being the final 12 teams in the playoff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even though the college football playoff is now expanded, it's still very competitive. And whenever you're losing to a team like NIU, it makes people wonder who you actually can beat and how much you have to go back to the drawing board. The Notre Dame offense is littered with problems right now. Riley Leonard, really good kid, had a lot of good spark at Duke. He's not really fulfilling what he's been asked to do over there. And so I think he's got to get better with decision making, a lot of different things on the field. He doesn't look totally comfortable in the offense. And so I do give credit to the people that are criticizing him for that. But at the same time, it seems like everyone's penning everything on Riley Leonard, and that's just not fair, and it's just not the case. When you look at the Notre Dame offense, I mean, you have a young offensive line that's having some issues. Supporting cast is not as great as it could be. And then the play calling, too, offensively, very questionable at certain times. So there's a lot of things that they really have to fix on that side of the ball. And looking at the upcoming schedule, I mean, depending on like the matchup, like we kind of look at Clemson and Georgia and how much of a measuring stick that was for both of those teams. Whenever you pay a school $1.4 million to come and play you, and then they beat you like that, and it's a very low-level school that you should have rolled over and everyone thought you were going to, like I said before, it kind of just begs the question of how good is Notre Dame. I mean, it might be a little bit too early to do what some people are doing, calling them frauds and saying that the Fighting Irish have no chance at being successful this season. I think that there's still chances to turn things around, but suffering a loss like that in that fashion that exposed so many issues really does make you wonder just where this team stands moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up some of the other issues that Notre Dame has with their team. I know there's been a lot of finger pointing at Riley Leonard, but you did write a piece for us at Sportsnet, which you can go out there and read right now on sportsnet.com, where you highlighted some of those other problems that you just mentioned there. One of the other things that I want to ask you as it relates to Notre Dame is, this is not the first time that head coach Marcus Freeman has lost one of these buy-in games. I mean, his second game as head coach at Notre Dame, Marshall stunned Notre Dame as well. That was another one of those games where they paid him, I believe, $1.25 million in that one. But this is do you think there's any chance that if Notre Dame should miss the playoff this year, that you might start hearing some rumblings about Marcus Freeman potentially being on a hot seat? I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here with this conversation, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we brought up was coaching and play calling. So there's clearly issues with that. And whenever you're losing games like this on even a semi-regular basis, whenever you were held to a standard like Notre Dame is, I mean, I've covered schools like LSU, looking at Georgia, other like Florida, for example. I mean, there's a certain standard that you are held to with certain teams. And Notre Dame cannot have this kind of lack of success and expect him to be comfortable in his job moving forward consistently.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to another topic here. One of the other big time games from last week was Texas and Michigan. Now, Texas went into Ann Arbor and completely rolled against the defending national championship, the Wolverines. Texas, along with Georgia, I think right now have kind of really solidified themselves as far and away the top two teams in the country right now, if he asks me. Now, we previewed this game last week. You said you thought Texas would win in this game, so I'm sure that came as no surprise to you. But what did you walk away from this game? Did you feel more impressed with what you saw from Texas, or do you have more questions and concerns about what you saw from Michigan?
I would say, if anything, I'm extremely concerned about Michigan. And it's because of this. Michigan offensively has no identity right now. The Wolverines need to get back to their roots of running the ball. Quarterback play is dismal right now. There's a lot of things that Davis Warren needs to do differently. just those types of things. And then the turnovers as well. So there's a lot of fixing that Michigan needs to do. Michigan itself has spoken on this and has kind of given the impression like, oh, a lot of these things can be fixed overnight. A lot of these things can be tweaked. So it's going to be the question of just how true is that? But then you talk about that, and then we also look at the defensive side of the ball. Michigan's been heralded over recent history for its defense, and it didn't show up against Texas. And we're going to have to see whether or not that's more of a testament to Texas, if Michigan can turn things around. But the passing defense certainly wasn't there. Quinn Ewers looked really, really good. I was really just pleased with the anticipation he was putting on throws, his accuracy. I feel like there was almost kind of this thing going on where Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders in the national media kind of surpassed him in terms of who is QB1. And before, like, it was a three-way race. We kind of stopped talking about Quinn Ewers, and I think that he demanded attention this week.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was one of the other things that I actually wanted to bring up with you is how I have seen a lot of the draft pundits out there now kind of reworking some of their rankings, and they do have Ewers as, potentially their QB1 now after the way he has played here in the first 2 weeks of the season. And I do see that he is the odds on favorite now, the money leader and to win the Heisman. So he's off to an excellent start this season as well. One of the biggest risers in this week's new updated college football rankings is Tennessee. They moved up 7 spots to number 7 in the rankings. They thumped NC State, in prime time, 51-10. And, they're led by their rookie dual threat quarterback, Nico. And I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right. Malave. You can correct me if I'm wrong with that, but he's looked sensational as well. With all the changes that occurred in the SEC, we heard so much about Oklahoma coming to the SEC and Texas coming to SEC. It seems like a lot of people may have slept on Tennessee, and now they are starting to turn some heads. So I want to get your thoughts on that. And do you feel that they are a legit contender for the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think Tennessee is. And when we look at the Volunteers, it almost seems as if they were snubbed by the national media, or just not even snubbed, but a little bit overlooked ahead of the season. And then you also have these highly rated quarterbacks like Nico. And you wonder, though, if they can back up the hype whenever they haven't had significant in-game reps. And he certainly has. Now, the question is, how does Tennessee fare against higher level competition? There's several teams in college football that haven't really, quote unquote, played anyone yet, and they're one of them. But at the same time, I think that they've shown just how electric their offense can be in the pieces that they have. So I'm excited to watch it come together moving forward against higher level competition. But I think, we can't talk about the college football playoff without talking about Tennessee right now.
Yeah, I think, as you said, they're flying under the radar, but not so much anymore. They're starting to get some attention here, and that quarterback is a big part of it. But also, their defense is playing pretty well as well. But there's another team that I want to ask you about, and they might not be getting a lot of attention nationally. Now, I know where I live. I'm up here, upstate New York. They're becoming a much bigger story, and that is the Syracuse Orange. Kyle McCord, the transfer from Ohio State. He has looked as good as any quarterback in the nation in his first 2 games of the year. They just knocked off a good Georgia Tech team this past weekend. Do you think Fran Brown and the Orange will continue to possibly make some noise here and be a contender and a factor in the ACC?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are actually starting to look at them as one of the best teams in the ACC, and what they've put on the field so far has been very inspiring. Kyle McCord, whenever he transferred, there were a lot of question marks and really some pessimism even surrounding his upside after things didn't go the way that he had wanted to at the initial part of his college career. But I think no one's really calling him a world beater right now, especially given the skepticism and that the fact that we're only 2 games in the schedule. Yeah. But I mean, he's certainly doing a good job. And I think that if he stays consistent, we're going to be talking about him a lot more. Certainly a very good performance out of them against legitimate competition this week.
Yeah. We do have to pump the brakes a little bit. It is only 2 games into the season, but we can only discuss what we've seen so far, and he's off to a great start. And I think Syracuse is a very good story, at least in my neck of the woods here in upstate New York. I want to end this conversation the same way we did last week, where we talked about and we looked ahead to the upcoming week. So week 3 is getting here. And I've been looking at the schedule. I've got a couple of games here on my list that I think have some intrigue. We have a game in the Big 12 between Kansas State and Arizona, 2 ranked teams. I think that'll be a good matchup. And then we got an SEC matchup as well with LSU and South Carolina. I believe that's where College Game Day, they're going to be heading to, I believe, South Carolina this week to cover that game. So that's a big one as well. Which one of these games, or maybe it's both, do you have highlighted on your schedule as a potential game of the week?
I would definitely say both of them. And the biggest thing when it comes down to Kansas State and Arizona that we look at is Kansas State's pass defense was not up to par against Tulane. Obviously, it came up whenever it needed to, whenever they intercepted Tulane in the end zone. But the thing is, that's going to have to be on display because Arizona just so happens to be a very pass happy team that is very good at it. So that's going to be the primary to watch up. The primary thing to watch over there. I tripped over my words. But when we look at LSU and South Carolina, LSU, I believe, is a very good team that was faced with a really good test against USC and had the chance to see what it needed to do better and what it needed to improve. And Garrett Nussmeier absolutely lit it up. And so I think we should be excited about how he continues to develop in a matchup like this. But also South Carolina and Kentucky was expected to be a close matchup. It was anything but that. So I think South Carolina caught a lot of people off guard as a much better team than anticipated. So this is going to tell us a lot about the SEC and where the SEC teams stand right now. And then looking at Brian Kelly, I think there's going to be some questions surrounding him if they cannot knock off South Carolina. Because LSU, like we talked about Notre Dame, LSU is another school that does not play around with the standard. It's a team that's held to a national championship standard. We think about 2019 and what Joe Burrow and Ed Ogeron were able to do there, and that is what is expected there.
Absolutely. College football season, it rolls on here into week 3. She is our college football insider here at sportsnot.com. You can follow her on X at Crissy_Froyd, and you can read her work and see her videos that she makes, which are great, by the way, at sportsnot.com. Crissy, thanks again so much for the time and have a great week.
Absolutely. Thank you.